We're here outside Riverside Station, which was a 13,000 square foot church converted into office space for the first episode of our new series called The Story of the Deal, where we're gonna dive into all of the details behind this project so that you know exactly how it came together and you can do your own too. What was so attractive about Riverside to you when you first found it?
The look of the building, I mean, it's an old historical Church of Christ, had a great bone structure to it, but it also had a ton of parking.
This is Mark Scrivner, co-founder and CEO of Snapshot Interactive and the owner of Riverside Station.
When we bought the building, we had to gut it from the floor all the way down to the basement area, which we'll show you, all the way to the ceiling. We really wanted to create a great experience when you walk in the front door.
This is the kind of roof or ceiling that almost every office user wishes that they could have.
We rebuilt the mezzanine area up here, which is a great space, got 20 workspaces.
You can see, of course, all of the reclaimed wood, the old stained glass.
As you look at the main stage, you can see that used to be the baptismal. The stained glass piece that is up above was the stained glass that was above the front door when we bought the building. And
y'all know that I'm big into adaptive reuse and keeping our historical buildings. So it's really neat that y'all have kept the history of what the property used to be and really not even kept it, but integrated it into what the space is today. So what's the history of the property? Because I know this is obviously not a brand new construction build.
It was built in 1937, and what I learned a ton about the history because I wanted the elders to all be completely involved and look at what we were going to do to the church and be a part of it. All the men of the church got drafted and they had to go overseas, so before they went, they built a rooftop over. So it was almost like a little one-level barn. That's what they learned how to build overseas. They came here and they built the bow truss ceiling, and the church was very successful for a long time in this community. I mean, 500 members or more along the way.
Why do you think it's so important to preserve historical buildings like this?
When we bought the church, it was actually under contract with a developer that had plans to tear the church down. Anytime you can reuse and repurpose things for a construction, it makes a world of difference in the story you can tell, from us preserving the floors that we took out of that sloped, and we reused them throughout the space, to the steel beams that hold up our center table came from the beams that held up the floor. All those elements, those stories, you just can't tell if you don't reuse.
When you're going through this process, you don't necessarily need to worry about how you're going to incorporate historic elements into your future design. Just make sure that you are surrounding yourself with the professionals that can, such as an architect, an interior designer, an engineer. That's what I do on every single project that we've got going forward. And if I have an idea, of course, I will relay that to them, but it may not necessarily be feasible. So that's why I make sure to lean on all of my professionals before we even start the process.
This is the main agency space. You can see, like, from the table that we created, like all the wood that is in the table and on the end caps all came out of the floor, so we reclaimed that, all the wood around the stage.
It's pretty wild how big the room feels just because of the taller ceiling.
So when we first bought the building, we came in, we were standing out in the parking lot, and this lady pulls into the parking lot. She said, "Hey, listen, if you'll give me the stained glass out of your windows, I'll make you a mural for your office." She ended up making this for us. Every piece in that, except for the white and the orange dots, came out of the original stained glass windows that were in the church.
Y'all did quite a bit of renovation on the property, so can you tell us a little bit about what it looked like when you first started working on the property and what y'all have done to it since?
One of the neater things that happened during this renovation was when we got up into almost the attic, they had a drop ceiling that covered the bow truss barrel ceiling. Seeing that barrel ceiling, it was like, God, what if we could expose this? And I think that's one of the main features when you walk into the space that's kind of breathtaking of what we've done here.
It's kind of wild to think that they just covered it up with drop ceilings back then. This is what a real studio setup looks like. We're gonna have to get to this level at some point.
When we came in, we built this with a self-contained HVAC unit that's dead silent.
It feels great in here, yeah.
We've got editor bays in here, so we've got 4 animator bays with some pretty high performance equipment.
So was this the first commercial property you bought?
Riverside Station was the first commercial property that I've ever bought. In fact, there were nights I couldn't sleep. I've never invested this much money in a property, and but it turned out the way that we thought it would. And just having good people around you that kind of reassure you that, hey, things will work out.
Now, one thing I want to know, because I hear this all the time, is that commercial real estate is incredibly scary for people on their first deal. And as you can see, even Mark was scared. I was scared on my first deal. You're not alone if you have those feelings, but I will tell you that almost every single person I have ever spoken to that got through that first deal said it was the best decision that they ever made, and they continued to buy properties after that. Obviously, you are an experienced entrepreneur, but going off into the commercial real estate investing realm is a little bit different. So when you were going through that process, who did you lean on, and what were your biggest questions?
When we ended up looking at the property very seriously, I've got a friend that does a lot of commercial real estate. His name is Mike Locker. When I was completely stressed out about the amount of money that I had invested, he said, Mark, if I could give you a piece of advice, he said, buy every residential property that touches your property anytime it comes up for sale. Let everybody know that touches your property that, hey, you'd be interested in talking to them down the road. And we've actually not only bought the building and converted it, but we bought 2 rental properties that adjoin our property, and it's been a real big game changer for the value of the property.
After the great financial crisis, everybody started moving to an open floor plan to try and save costs, but also create community. And it's funny how that kind of actually ended up backfiring and in many ways, but now there's this hybrid, very similar to what you all have. The majority of people work over here, but we've got all of these private offices for whomever needs them whenever.
The challenges that came up were things out of everybody's control. It wasn't a lot of big bust in the project as far as financially, but just when you renovate a church that was built in 1937, the walls aren't necessarily perfectly in line. The architect and the contractor from time to time had to work together to reimagine some things. All of those came up. They worked seamlessly together to make sure it was a pretty good experience for us. These were the original stone walls. So this is when I was talking about when the country went to war. So they built this rock wall. This is a shared break room in the building, and so everybody in the building, all the other tenants will come down and have lunch together, so it's really a cool space. I actually have thought about down the road potentially leasing it to a coffee shop. I think it'd be a perfect fit for that.
I was gonna say, with the table, the way that you've got it set up already, and honestly how big this break room, this is the break room to end all break rooms.
Yeah.
What did you get wrong on the project? Or what did you wish that you could have done differently?
When we took on the project, I think one thing that we probably could have done differently is we waited for a little too long to build out the downstairs. It was almost like we had to restart the project to build out the 2 spaces that we have down in the garden level. I wish we would have done it all at the same time, which I think probably would have saved us a little bit of money in the overall.
Now, I will say, when you're going through these projects, the more space you can finish out and get ready for a tenant to occupy, the easier it's going to be on you. It will actually save on construction costs because your contractor won't have to restart the job, get their subcontractors out there. But oftentimes there is a big financial constraint, especially when you're looking at a building that's 13,000 square feet that needs a full gut renovation. So if you're on the edge as to whether to do that or not, my recommendation is typically go ahead and do it, because chances that you'll get that leased out fairly quickly, especially if it's a cool and unique space like this, are pretty high. What did you purchase the property for?
A year earlier, I could have bought it for $500,000. A year later, when I drove by and saw a sale sign in the yard and I knew that, hey, we needed to get out of Cummins Station, we ended up spending $1.4 million on the property.
What was your initial construction budget and where did it end up falling?
So we bought the property for 1.4. We had a construction budget of 1.9. We ended up hitting a construction budget of 2.1 million. So we were a couple $100,000 over, some of which was things that we requested after the fact, some of which were just busts that we didn't foresee or the contractor didn't foresee. But all in all, it was pretty seamless.
So let's break those numbers down a little bit more. 1.4 million on the purchase and 2.1 million on the construction cost brings you to an all-in price of 3.5 million for a 13,000 square foot building. Now that's about $269 a foot. Could he have possibly built that cheaper brand new? Maybe. The problem is the land cost is also already included in that $269 a foot, and where it might cost about $250 a square foot to build new construction, you'll still have additional land costs on top of that. Now, if he wanted to build this and just rent it out as an investment, let's say maybe that's what you want to do. You just want to build this, you don't have a company that wants to occupy it, you just want to triple net lease it to other tenants. All he would need to do in order to achieve an 8% cap rate on this property is to rent it at $21 a square foot triple net. So what Mark did is incredibly intelligent on this property by using his company to own or occupy a majority of the space, but this could also work incredibly well for somebody that's just looking to buy a building and turn it into an investment.
This used to be the basement. We actually walled off so that we could create two spaces, so there's another office on the other side, but the great thing about this space is just the amount of parking that we have. Like, clients can come in here, tenants can come in here, and they can get really dense with the space. This used to be an architectural design firm.
So of course they went all out with the glass doors.
The amount that you can do in a 1,000 square foot space these days is, really big, like fit a lot of people in here comfortably.
Let's be honest, we're moving back to a work from the office environment, and having the opportunity to kind of shift your mindset by shifting your space.
Totally.
I mean, you've got that everywhere here.
This is another conference room that we have. This used to be the old daycare. It's right underneath the entry to the building. If there's ever a tornado, it's probably the safest place in the whole building.
Probably the safest place in East Nashville. Yeah. What's the future of Riverside Station?
We want to create a collaborative over here where we can actually grow our agency. So we have a digital agency that it's an owner-occupied building where we run Snapshot Interactive out of. But we also want to have extra space where we can come in and incubate small agencies that are starting up. Even, I've thought down the road of how do we build out parcel units that we can build for smaller companies that want to come in and lease a little space but have access to, a bigger building and different resources. Like, we've got a great studio here, so if you're a videographer or a photographer, we've got everything a person would need to come in and start their video company.
There are so many things that I love about this first property for the story of the deal, from the fact that they preserved a beautiful historic corner here in East Nashville, all the way to the fact that Mark got really creative and couldn't necessarily find the office space that was right for him and converted a church into what works. So when you're out there looking for your next investment, don't pigeonhole yourself just to looking at office buildings or retail buildings. Get creative. See what's out there that is maybe undervalued because people don't know how to look at it, and figure out what you could convert it into. So there you have it for our first episode of the story of the deal. I hope that these videos help you as you start your commercial real estate journey, and stay tuned for more.